Earthlings.
Hello,
Welcome
everyone.
to the Animal Rights Show.
Welcome, everybody.
So it's a bit of a special today, isn't it?
Extra special.
Extra special.
Extra special.
So we're here to chart or mark or celebrate. I'm not quite sure what to say in that. The 50 years of Animal Liberation Front. We've got a couple of guests who we've announced. That's Ronnie and Louise, and we've got a couple more who are surprise guests. So stick with us; it should be good. Hello for everybody coming in. We've got Philip from New York.
Oh, Philip! Hello, Philip.
I'd probably say even worse than you there, Wendy, but there you go.
What do you mean worse than me? What are you saying?
Yeah.
What are you trying to say? Hey?
Yeah, picking a fight already. Right, so
we got Joanna here as well. Hey, Joanna, and we've got. Oh no, I'm terrible with.
We've got Linda.
We got Linda. We got Jeremy, Terry. Welcome everybody. Lovely to see you all.
Roisin, yeah.
Roisin.
Yeah, Joanna. And there's the ape again. What about the back?
As in front, Animal Liberation Front.
Oh, right.
There, he's off already.
Yeah,
okay.
About as best as it's going to do, is it? Yeah, okay. Right, so without further ado, as they say in media circles, we'll bring on our first victim, and that, of course, is Ronnie.
Yay. The General.
Hello,
Hi, everyone.
Ronnie. Welcome.
You're out of focus,
Hi,
Ronnie.
great to be here.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Lovely to see you, Ronnie, as always. Ronnie, have you got your soft focus lens on, like they used to do in Dallas, like on Dynasty and all that?
I don't know whether I've got one on this. Only
Not
just
that you
about
showed
know how
about.
to work it without any things like that on it, to be honest.
How are you, Ronnie?
I'm okay. I've had a busy weekend. Did some outreach Saturday, vegan outreach Saturday. Yesterday we went to Camp Beagle. That they had it was a sort of a joint celebration, I suppose, in a sense, because it's been just over 5 years that ago Camp Beagle was set up outside MBR Acres, who breed puppies to send to experimentation, and also, you know, just last month 50 years of the ALF. So it was a kind of joint commemoration stroke celebration, I suppose, in a sense of resistance that went over the whole weekend. But Louise and I went there yesterday, and I gave a little talk there about the ALF. So yeah, so it's a busy weekend.
You're in big demand, General, big demand.
Well, I suppose at the moment, I suppose, because of the 50 years, yes, yeah.
Right, before we get going, Ronnie, I'm going to just show this little clip just to get everybody in the mood. So here we go.
Do we condone the widening exploitation of animals? Or do we act to end it?
The people here who have masks on are people who either aren't known to the police or whose activities aren't known to the police. Whereas with myself, I've already been to prison twice for Animal Liberation Front activities. Each of us spent a year in prison. And then in the spring of 1976, the Animal Liberation Front was formed, and that rapidly grew to be a much larger organisation, and now has several hundred members.
Since 1977, there have been more than 400 animal liberation raids in Britain, and many in the USA, Canada, Holland and France.
We'd feel it perfectly okay for someone to have broken into a concentration camp to free people, or to damage the torture equipment used by the Nazis. And, you know, we see the torture and imprisonment of animals in the same light. And I think if you look at it like that, it would seem probably that our activities are much too lenient rather than being extreme in any way.
Front. Early this morning, one of our groups was in action in the southwest of England. The target was a factory farm, Sunnyside Poultry Limited. Here, many thousands of chickens are forced to live in very small wire cages. More than 100 birds were rescued.
Right. So where did that posh voice come from? And also,
I know I used to, whenever I was on being filmed back in those days, I used to try and put on a posh voice. I don't bother now, but I did then.
Is it like when you put on a telephone voice as well?
Yeah, I want to tell you, I got to speak posh.
Well,
Yeah.
can't you put your posh voice on for the duration of the Animal Rights Show? No.
No, I can't be asked now, Roger, with all that.
Oh, that would be funny though.
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah, Roger,
So, Ronnie,
something like that. Thank you very much for inviting me on. Yeah.
is it emotional to think of that time, especially now with that 50 years have passed? And of course, all these individuals who were liberated had a life, which is super important. Because for every one of us, our life is the most important thing that we have. But animals are still oppressed. Humans are still oppressed. And half a century has passed. So what's your first thoughts on the topic?
Well, yes. I mean, in some ways, that's a big question because, there's kind of quite a lot to be said about it. I think the ALF played an important part in sparing a very large number of fellow animals from suffering and slaughter. That's the first thing I'd say. Here in the UK, I'd say that was mainly with regard to the ALF's campaigns against animal experimentation, the animal experimentation industry, and the fur trade. I think the ALF had a significant impact on both of those industries. But we also need, as well as celebrating the success or successes of the ALF in terms of the animals that were spared through our activities, I think we have to learn in other ways from the ALF as well. We have to learn from the limitations of the ALF. There are positive things about the ALF, but the ALF also have limitations as well. And I think we have to learn from both those things.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe that it helped? Because that's my belief, that it helped a lot to raise awareness and make the public think about our fellow animals in their laboratories, for example. That's now,
yeah.
But did you have pushback back then?
I think it did. I think that I think a lot of people back then weren't aware of animal experimentation. Even they just didn't. I mean, I didn't. Before I sort of read the. I went vegan through reading a copy of the Vegetarian Society's magazine, and it was through reading that same magazine that I found out about vivisection and the fur trade and all those things. And before that, even though I was vegetarian, I didn't know about any of that. So there wasn't general awareness of what was going on. So I think that the actions that the ALF took against the animal experimentation industry did make members of the public aware of it. Yes. I don't think we did an awful lot to educate people about what they could do about it, though. Mm-hmm. It just created an awareness that there was this facility involved in animal experimentation, and some people went along and caused damage or went along and rescued some animals, and so it made people aware that animal experimentation existed, but it didn't really teach people, it didn't really educate people about what they themselves could do about it. And I think that was a major, that was one of the major limitations of the ALF, really.
Ronnie, I've got a question, and I know we're going to talk more about all of that later, like limitations and the role of ALF in the movement and things. But just going back to the very, very start of all of this, like even Band of Mercy, and then because obviously you started with that, and it eventually became ALF after you came out of prison, I understand. But just before all of that, before you started all this kind of much more direct action, were you embarking on that with this knowledge that I could end up in prison for these actions, or were you not even bearing that in mind? And were you prepared to go to prison for that?
Yes, I was aware I probably would be put in prison, and that awareness was heightened really because the first job I had after I left school was working in a solicitor's office. So I used to go to court cases on, sometimes I used to go on behalf of my boss and sit behind the barrister. I used to go and visit people in prison to take statements from them, for their court cases. So I was kind of, very aware of the situation of the courts and of prison and of the law. I went to the as part of my training, because I was training to be a solicitor at one time before I got arrested originally for Band of Mercy activities. And obviously when that happened, I could no longer carry on working at the solicitor's office. But I was training to be a solicitor. So I went to the College of Law and I did I kind of passed the first part of the Law Society's examination. So I knew about the law, and that included the criminal law. So I was well aware of the sort of penalties I could be facing for what I was doing. So yeah, I kind of did expect eventually to be caught and to be sent to prison, and yeah, I was prepared for that.
Yeah, and while you were serving in prison, and maybe Roger, you can answer this as well, do you feel then the frustration of the inability to be active, because obviously that's your purpose in life, and then suddenly that's taken away from you, and then you're not able to do the things you want to do or be active for fellow animals at all, apart from obviously maybe educating yourself? And I know there were things you did from prison as well. But
it was frustrating, yes, but I just tried to make the best of it, because I actually served 3 sentences altogether, and plus time on remand. It all ended up to about 9 years in prison. When you add all the bits together, it was about 9 years. And I always tried to do my best to carry on campaigning for animal liberation while in prison, through letters to people and through writing articles and that kind of thing. But obviously it's not the same as being in the outside world and being able to do action out here.
Yeah. Did you feel the same way, Roger?
Yeah, it was. I do remember, you kind of go into a cell and then the door slams on you and you think, wow, so that's it for a while, kind of thing. And so I did what you suggested. I got involved with education because I wasn't a very educated person at all when I went into prison. I had no qualifications whatsoever. And so I thought, well, I'll take a pay cut, as it were, and do education rather than sew mailbags. And then I was thinking ahead then in terms of I'll be much more used to the movement as a kind of educated person than if I just kind of twiddle my thumbs. I also did there was quite a lot of people who were writing all the time. So you're able to do all that kind of stuff.
There's a little tribute here from the ape. It's hard to imagine without living that. Thank you, Ronnie, for all you've done for our fellow animals in the last 50 years. And as a follow-up, I guess same for Roger too.
Yeah, I mean, that's lovely, and thank you, Jeremy. But I think that kind of, we need to thank everyone and praise everyone that's been involved in the struggle for animal liberation, because it isn't something I could have done on my own. You know, it was only with the help of others and the involvement of others that I did the things I did, and no doubt Roger would say the same. So there's very many people that have been involved in this struggle, and all of those people, you know, deserve praise.
What's interesting is it struck me earlier as well is the ALF activists who are well known are the ones who got caught.
Yes, and I think this is why you don't hear about so many women, because because there were some really good women activists, and quite a few of them didn't get caught. Perhaps they were cleverer than the men.
I did think about that actually, because
yeah. And so you kind of don't hear, you maybe don't hear so much about them because they, you know, quite a few of them didn't get caught.
Well, the Screws used to take the mickey out of the cons, didn't they? By going, don't be thinking you're a successful criminal, mate, because you're in here. The successful ones are still out
They're out there.
Yeah, it's all through mistakes you make. You know, the only reason I've ever got caught was through. It kind of wasn't through clever police detection work or anything. It's through mistakes. To be honest, you think about why did I do that? Why didn't I think of that? That's how we, you know, I think on pretty much every occasion I got arrested and ended up being put in jail. It was through some sort of mistake I made.
Going back to the women of ALF, often this is the critique against ALF, that it was too militaristic, too macho, too male, but that's not true, is it? I mean, it's so unfair to ALF. It's also unfair to women, in my opinion. So,
yeah, there were some brilliant women activists in the ALF, absolutely brilliant, who organised stuff, who organised some incredible actions, and a lot of them aren't as well known as the men. I mean, there are other men that did great things that aren't really spoken about as well. And I think a lot of it depends on who's still around today, who's prominent on social media and that kind of thing. Those are the people.
We're about to bring one of those great men on, actually, Ronnie. But before that, I've got a double-barrel question, and it goes back to early ALF raids, both involving the liberation of beagles. So the first one, there's a breeder in Wales, in Capel Isaac, it's Carmarthenshire. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So you say in your biography that you managed to find homes for 13 young dogs before the raid, right? And so my first question is, I suppose that vegan-run sanctuaries were probably pretty rare then. You might have had a few vegetarian-run ones, and I expect most of them were probably just, flesh eaters. So the question is, did they know what they were taking on, or did you have to cook up a story for them? That's my first question.
They knew, to be honest, I would say. We'd go around. Yeah, we'd go around and that's right. I can't really think of any vegan-run sanctuaries at the time. I can't really think of any sanctuaries back then in the 1970s that were for farmed animals. It was pretty much all dogs and cats. And when we rescued other animals, say rats or mice, guinea pigs, animals like that, they tended to be taken in by sympathizers, by individual sympathizers rather than by sanctuaries. But dogs and cats, I mean, particularly dogs, we were able to take to sanctuaries. We'd go round to the sanctuaries first and talk to them, and maybe sort of suss out what their feelings were, and then ask them if they could take, how many dogs they could take, and then whatever figure we came to, that was the number we rescued.
This is the tragic thing, isn't it? You kind of go to a animal use unit, and you know you've got 56, or in this case 13, and
Yeah.
you think, okay, so which 13? Right.
I know. I mean that one. I remember it's still in my head. The one at Capital Isaac. So looking back, we got the 13 dogs. Looking back and seeing all the other puppies that were in these. They were kind of in this, where it was like cages, really. Sort of open top cages where you could just reach in and lift them out. And I remember looking back and seeing all the ones that we left behind, and thinking about what their fate would be. Yeah. But you have to act. You don't have too much time to think. You have to act so quickly. But I remember that.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing, isn't it? You're so busy that you don't get kind of caught up with the emotion of it. One of my favorite memories is, because you're saying you lined up the sanctuaries. We also had to line up some vets and stuff. I remember taking a beagle to a vet, and he looked in the ear like vets do, general health check, and the tattoo was there, and he went, "Oh, wrong ear," and he opened the one with that.
Oh my
God.
We had a tattoo, which was nice. But
I remember we had a vet who offered his services to the ALF, and he said, "I'm very sympathetic. I'm a vegan. I want to help you." And we immediately thought, well, maybe he can help sort of removing tattoos and checking animals over when they were first rescued. So I think that 3 of us went round to see him, and we were chatting away to him, and he had a phone call up in his office that was upstairs. He went upstairs to the office to answer his phone, and we searched his fridge. We searched his fridge just to make sure he was really vegan.
Oh, that's where the came from.
Yeah, but he was, and he was actually great. Yeah.
So my second question, just before we bring our first surprise guest on, who is waiting in the green room, this was before the Welsh raid, and this was a raid on Pfizer in Sandwich, right? Is it weird little village called Sandwich, right? In Kent.
Yeah, that would have been after the Welsh raid, because that I think no wait a minute, no, it could it would have been before. Sorry, I'm thinking about something else.
According to your book, it was before.
Yeah, because I think the Sandwich raid, I think, may have been the first ever raid under the name of the ALF.
Yeah, well, now you liberated 3 beagles, and they ended up all being pregnant, and so they eventually gave birth to another 13 puppies, and so you ended up then with 16 rather than 3. So this reminds me of a problem that arose in the movement, in the sense that if you rescued pregnant other animals and then they subsequently gave birth, you were arriving at your homes with too many, and it caused a few problems.
Yes, it would have done. I mean, I wasn't myself involved in that raid. What happened? That was the first ever raid that was done under the name of the ALF after the name was changed from the Band of Mercy, and I was I was sort of more behind the scenes at that time, thinking that I'll kind of stay back, for a while, because sort of the police are going to be watching me. But I soon got back in the action. I couldn't stay out of it. But that actual raid, I didn't take part in.
Yeah, it says in the book you got itchy feet. So now we're going to bring on our first surprise. So I think we are waiting. Right, here we go. So Ronnie, you will recognize Robin Lane. Everyone? Yes.
Hey, Robin.
Hello, Robin.
Welcome.
Hey, Ronnie. Hey, Nella. Hey, Ronnie. Hey, Roger. Again. And Nella again.
Right, let me just see if I can.
Thanks so much for coming on, Robin. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
Just going to boost your volume a little bit to see if I can.
Just to say, I might have to drop out and come back in. I'm having a few glitches on my screen. No one else is getting that right. Everyone's vibrating.
No.
No.
It's your thing.
Unless I've got something in this drink that I don't know about. It's me. Everyone's really vibrating, like Max Headroom. Do you remember Max Headroom? A bit like that. It's really
Your head's not vibrating. It's completely still.
I'm just going to go out and come in. It's obviously at my end. I'll see you in a moment.
See you in a minute. Now, Robin, let's get this issue out of the way. Because I noticed.
I know what issue you're going to talk about.
Yeah. So you commented the other day on something. It might have been in a report about what was going on at MBRA, because I don't know. And you said quite assertively that we shouldn't say the ALF, but ALF, and you've got a particular reason why, right?
Well, you know, I have every respect for Ronnie, and Ronnie is like came up with the name in the first place, Animal Liberation Front. And I don't want to say Ronnie shouldn't be saying the ALF, but to be perfectly honest with you, the state wants us to say the ALF, right? Now, when I gave evidence in my hearing inquiry for undercover police officers in November 2024, I had to argue for hours that the ALF is not an organization, that it's not a group, that doesn't have members, doesn't have a hierarchy. They really, really wanted that. They really wanted that. And I think you can go back with Ronnie, you know, back to 1986, was it, in Sheffield, where they wanted to call you the general, and they wanted to have Viv as a lieutenant, you know. They really need to have this as the ALF, the Animal Liberation Front, so they can condemn it as a terrorist group. Okay, they're not, I'm not saying that they're going to make it, you know, prescribe it or anything like that. But I had to argue for hours about this. And only last week, the inquiry, who I have to say is funded by the Home Office, who is funded by the government, who is funded by the state, still were trying to make out that ALF was an organization with a hierarchy. And I managed to put them off that, which is a great success. So that's why I've been saying, I know some people think I'm being a bit pedantic and everything, but that's why I've been saying that I really think we should say ALF and not ALF.
I look forward to jumping in for the rest of the things. No, wait a minute. It's ALF. Now,
because you see, if I can just put this in, ALF says, or Ronnie said, that is autonomous and anonymous. But if it's an organization with a hierarchy, it's not autonomous or anonymous. You see what I mean? You can't have both. You've got to have one or the other. And I believe it's better to be autonomous and anonymous. That's my personal take on it. Not everyone's going to agree.
No, I actually agree with you. It's just that Ronnie and I are going to struggle now for the rest of the program.
Yeah. I think yes. Let's say ALF was autonomous, and really the idea, in a sense, was to be anonymous, in that we didn't want any of the people known and that were involved. You know, if they proclaimed who they were, then they were in grave danger of being arrested and you know, put on trial. I became known individually because I got caught and put in jail a couple of times, and then I became a press officer, and so I was known in that sense. But the idea was not to be, was for people not to be known. I mean, you know, all the various organizations that advocate for our fellow animals, that, you know, the people involved in running those make no secret of who they are, of course, because they're not in danger of being prosecuted for anything. But with ALF activities, people were, and so the idea would, of course, be to remain anonymous.
Well, it's absolutely essential, isn't it? Really? I mean,
yeah.
So I have a question for all of you. What was the role of press officers, and how much they were, tailed by the police? Did you feel that there is always someone behind you following your moves? Did you have to live with this feeling every day?
If I can just say, getting back to the undercover police inquiry, I found out that I had, certainly within the inquiry, and I had more undercover police officers tailing me, keeping me under surveillance than anyone else in the inquiry regarding animal rights. I had 7. I said to the barrister, "Wow, I must have been popular with the police, because I had 5 undercover police officers tailing me," and she said, "No, 7." And I was, so yeah, I think we were always, I'm sure I'm speaking for Roger and Ronnie as well. We were always aware that there were people listening and watching and following and all that. Wouldn't you both agree with that? I mean,
yeah, now they do it with mobile phones.
Well, then they do it with drones now.
Yeah.
There was a guy, a prominent activist in London, that was being followed by the police, but they weren't very good at following because he always sussed out when he's being followed. And once he kind of stopped his car, jumped out, ran back to the car behind him, and kind of started having a go at the guy driving. And the guy driving denied he was the police, but he saw documentation just in the car that proved that this guy, just caught sight of it. But he also found out where they were hiring their vehicles. The police were hiring their vehicles from a car hire company that hired out kind of high-end vehicles. And of course, that became a target for the ALF, and loads of their cars at this car hire place got damaged, because of that. But yes, I mean, I think the thing is with the ALF press office became a sort of poison chalice, really, because it got a big part of me being prosecuted in the big case at Sheffield where I got the 10-year sentence. A lot of the evidence against me related to my role as the press officer. And so after that, it became rather dangerous to be the press officer. Robin became the press officer after me, and Robin got sent to prison for that. and so then for ages after that.
Yeah. I mean, it was Thatcher's thing, the oxygen of publicity, she called it. And I was convicted for the oxygen of publicity. But getting back to what Nella said about where we've followed or whatever under surveillance. But if you think about ALF in relation to the campaign against the fur departments in department stores, that was an unprecedented success. And I think, considering how much damage was caused to the department stores continuously. I mean, I was press officer when I was dealing with all the incendiary device campaign in that period from 86. I think that was an incredibly successful campaign by ALF. And I don't think that the activists were really known, actually, until of course, Bob Lambert came on the scene and collared Andrew Clark and Jeff Shepherd. But, it was a vast campaign, and it was highly successful. Amazing.
Yeah, it was. I got followed from in front of me. I learned that what they did on the motorways is they would station themselves in front of you, and they would come off at every junction. And if you didn't, they'd join again and then overtake you. And if you did, then they'd go around the roundabout, and then they'd be behind you. That's the way it used to work there. I was followed from Liverpool to London and then back again, because I was on bail for something. So technically they could have nicked me then, but they didn't. So they must have had something else in mind.
They may have wanted to find out who you were meeting with and who you were liaising with, probably.
Yeah, it was the SEAL lads, Southeast Animal Liberation League. That's yeah. So anyway, right. Oh, now I showed you this before, Robin, and this is this book by David Henshaw. Everybody of a certain generation really hates it because it's full of mistakes and lies and stuff. The interesting thing about you in the index of this is that it goes Lee, Ronnie, and it goes Yates, Roger. It just calls you Lane, right?
Oh. Well, I'm obviously not as important as you two because I didn't get my first name.
Yeah, but unless it means that he didn't actually know what your first name was, which was a bit weird because he's supposed to be a journalist.
But then again, I did work under a pseudonym, not copied.
Yeah, that's
from
right. That's what I was bringing on. So tell us about Chris Oakley then, Robin.
Very quickly. I told you earlier. Well, the name. Well, I mean, the reason I chose a pseudonym was because I know that you didn't, and Ronnie didn't. The reason I chose it because I got a phone call from someone saying that they were a butcher, and they knew where I lived, and they were going to get me, and they were going to come after me in a car, and they had pickaxe handles or whatever, and they were going to do me over. So I thought, well, it's probably a good idea if I oh, and a journalist turned up on my doorstep as well with a couple of heavies, you know. And they had my address, and they put my address in the newspaper. So I figured I probably should have a pseudonym, and so I chose Chris Oakley just because I just thought it sounded respectable, really, you know. And I got Oakley from Oakley Square in London, but I was very jealous of the Midlands press officer. I had the best name of all, Neil Davenport. Amazing. I wish I'd had that one, you know. So Chris Oakley, well, there you go. Just one of those things, you know.
Yeah, but Robin, we can't let you away with that because you've got such a sweet reason for why you're now called Robin, right? Because you were supposed to be called Christopher, right?
Oh, you wanted to hear about that? Yeah, my mum wanted to call me Christopher after Christopher Robin in Winnie the Pooh. Yeah, that's right. My auntie got there first, so I ended up just being Robin. So that's the story, Roger. It's a nice, lovely story, isn't it?
Yeah. I really like it.
Well, you know, I'd always wanted to be Chris, so I just chose Chris, and I got the Oakley from Oakley Square. So I didn't actually like the name particularly. I was like, I wish I was Neil Davenport.
This guy was a total liar. He claimed that you stole it from the editor of the Liverpool Echo because he was also called Chris Oakley.
That is actually so unbelievable. And I don't even know if I think that's true that there was a journalist for the Liverpool Echo called Chris Oakley, but I really had no idea about that until I read it in the book. It's so ridiculous. You know? I mean, why would I want to use the name of a Liverpool journalist? It's a ridiculous idea. But you know, David Henshaw, wasn't he the one that did Brass Tacks? Was he the same journalist? When they had Tim Daly on the show. They had Tim Daly on the show with the Was that David Henshaw?
And also the last thing on this guy, because the least we say is the better. But I asked you before because this guy claimed to have been branded by ALF, but it wasn't during your time. So was that during your time, Ronnie, when this guy said ALF branded him?
Wasn't that the guy that did the undercover investigation type thing on Robin Webb? I don't think David Henshaw was branded.
The one where Robin Webb was. Right. The one where Robin Webb was showing how to make
it's a Channel 4 a Channel 4 so-called documentary, and this guy who actually was known to a lot of people as a really dodgy character, and had I known Robin was going to meet up with him, I'd have warned Robin immediately, but I didn't know. He had a hidden camera and went and spoke to Robin. It's to do with secondary devices. And then after that, he claimed that, you know, because of that program, he'd been held down and branded by ALF. They kind of showed a picture of it. It looked very much like felt tip pen, the brand. But that's just, I'm that's just a lie. Just a lie to get me.
I do remember a picture of it, and at least it didn't say the ALF. So I
did say the ALF, but no, that's true.
That would have said more.
So how are we doing so far, Robin? I think we've mentioned ALF a few times now. We haven't said the ALF.
Ronnie's actually started to say ALF. It's very, very good.
Yeah.
But you know what? You can say the ALF press office, and you can say the ALF supporters group. That's very important because the inquiry wanted the inquiry were arguing with me for hours to say that the ALF supporters group was the same as Animal Liberation Front. You know, they couldn't get it. They really wanted to emphasize it. And you know, we argued for hours. You know, sorry.
Let me ask you about the supporters then. What was the reaction of the general public back then when something was known, even when you are not known about these actions, and then later during the trials, what was the reaction of the public? Did they support, did they cheer you on? Did you have letters and inquiries about how they could join? Was all negative, all positive? How was it?
Well, I think, if I can just say, ALF didn't really care about what the general public, in my time, I'm not sure about anyone else's, in my period as press officer, the general public weren't it wasn't important what the general public thought about ALF. It really was not. I mean, back in the day when Ronnie, much earlier on than me, the Daily Mirror was very supportive of ALF, and they were very, very supportive of the rescues and stuff. But they dropped that support. But as far as I'm concerned, ALF was all about causing economic sabotage and rescuing animals. And other groups were more concerned about whether the public were supportive or not. Would you agree, Roger and Ronnie, with that? Do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. We weren't bothered about the public. It was a direct war against the people that oppressed other animals, and we weren't bothered about public opinion.
Yeah, so we did beg the question, though, doesn't it? Was that a mistake? Should we have been more interested in the public, and we could have ended up as an education thing.
Well, I think had the ALF set out to be an educational organisation, I think ALF actions would have been somewhat different. In other words, we're saying we're going to carry out actions to educate the public. That's our aim. Then there'd have been no need to do the sort of actions that involve serious.
Like the incendiary devices in the department stores. I mean, if you'd had,
there wouldn't have been.
If ALF thinking, we've got to think about the public, or they're not going to like incendiary devices in department stores, then that wouldn't have happened. And then you wouldn't have had the situation where the UK fur trade is completely decimated and has never recovered. And I think that is the greatest success that ALF ever carried out, in my opinion. Never recovered, and it's now being finished.
No. I mean, that's absolutely true. But the other sort of major success of the ALF in terms of sparing our fellow animals from suffering and slaughter was actually against the vivisection industry. When the ALF was formed in 1976, the number of UK experiments on our fellow animals, according to government figures, was over 6 million. And after 10 years of ALF activity, which a lot of which was against the vivisection industry, that figure had fallen to 3 million. There was a reduction of over 3 million animals per year experimented on. And when you add that up, that was a huge area of success as well. And I think that there isn't any other reason for that other than the ALF. There's no legislation or anything like that being brought in to reduce animal experimentation. And so I think that can be put down to the ALF as well. And that was a huge area of success too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? I've come in at the end of that little bit of conversation, but just going back to what you were saying about not aiming to please the public, and then if we'd have done different actions, we could have been more educational. Wouldn't that be better if actually the movement was just a little bit more cooperative with each other? So ALF actions could be taken, and at the same time or around the same time, other campaigns could be more educational campaigns could be launched to coincide so that there's a collaboration and cooperation between different factions of the movement. Direct action.
I mean, I think there were. Sorry, carry on. Butted in.
No, that's all right.
I think there were, in relation to, for instance, Roger in 87, he produced a series of fact sheets from the ALF supporters group. Do you remember those, Roger? I thought that was really good because it had Animal Liberation Front on the front of the leaflet, or it was a little. It wasn't a leaflet, was it? It was, you could fold it up, but I thought that was a really good tactic, But at the end of the day, I mean, I think what Ronnie says is that, and also at the time, you've got to remember in the 80s in particular, the movement was huge. I mean, when I was press officer, there was 4 to 5 actions every single day, every day for, a year, 2 years, 3, whatever. And there was a huge amount of support for Animal Liberation Front in those days, huge amount, because there was the anarchist movement, there was the punk movement, there was the, it was the perfect storm in a way at that point. So it didn't really matter about trying to please the general public. But I think later on, I think that became more important to please the general public, to make maybe the actions a bit more public friendly or whatever. I don't know. I'm not really sure. But.
Well, in a weird way, the punk movement weren't that bothered about the public either, were they? They were more, so there's that.
Yeah, true.
Let me just add this to the stage. Now, excuse the sexist nature of this, but this is the full front page of the Daily Mirror, which is a tabloid headline. This is when we were getting some, fairly good press. But I wanted just to pick up on that numbers thing, because we spoke about this before. Because in this book, Henshaw says that there was about between, I think he says 7 or 8 actions per night, and this one says 400. So this is bound to be wrong, really. I think we can just all agree that this is obviously fiction,
Yeah, I would say that was definitely wrong, but I think it would be correct to say that at one point, especially in maybe the mid 80s, ALF was said to be the largest domestic threat to the government and to the state, much more so than the IRA at the time. So it was huge, it was, and maybe it wasn't 400 a day. That would have been crazy, but certainly it was a massive threat. Yeah, ALF was a massive threat.
Yeah,
in that period.
So why do you think that the state dedicated all these resources for so long to cut ALF?
I think
did they perceive it as such a threat?
I think because the whole system, the whole of the state, the whole of everything, the whole of everybody is about the exploitation and murder of animals. I think it rests on that. And it is a massive thing. And I think when we talk about everyone becoming vegan and world veganism and all the rest of that, it's kind of fanciful, because when you think about the industries worldwide that are exploiting and murdering animals, it is absolutely massive, bigger than any other industry, in my opinion. And I think they were so frightened not by people being vegan necessarily and wanting to help animals. I think it was about, they were worried about the state collapsing. And that's why they put people in prison for 14 years and 11 years and all that. They really wanted to stop it, And unfortunately, I think they have to a certain extent, certainly in the UK anyway. But I think that's the reason anyway.
Yes, the power of those industries and the influence they have on government, really. I mean, it's interesting to know how they support certain industries and not others in terms of threats to them by animal rights campaigners. I would certainly say stepped in big time, really big time, to support animal experimentation and the vivisection industry. And I think that it was actions against that industry that promoted a lot of the response of the state and all the different things they did. And then you've got what happened with the Shack campaign. What's happened today, with campaigns against vivisection, this new law they brought in to make life sciences, or in other words, experiments on animals, that's part of national infrastructure, so they can kind of come down more heavily on protesters or prosecute protesters more easily. I say all that's still going on. So they'll steadfastly defend animal experimentation. They'll steadfastly defend the meat industry, dairy industry, and the industry, so involved in the production and consumption of animal products, and we've seen that just recently. There's been all this kind of various organisations launching campaigns against factory farming, and the government have made it so it's a lot easier now for factory farms to get planning permission as their response to that.
Isn't that because it's inevitable, Ronnie, in the sense that both vivisection and animal farming. These are globalized industries.
Huge.
One
They have huge.
country cannot stand outside of the globalized system. So one country can't, for example, Britain couldn't go free range. It just couldn't happen.
Well, you'd have imports, wouldn't you? If you'd have to stop all imports of animal products, wouldn't you? But I think the thing is, it's the influence of those industries on government, and the fact that the government is prepared to go along with those industries, and kind of are in league with these industries. The political ideology of consecutive governments has been in league with those industries, hasn't it? Been in league with corporate business, of which those industries are a huge part. But when you get other stuff, you see the government, although ALF activists were put in prison for actions against the fur trade, the government didn't step in to save the fur trade. They didn't step in. It's been decimated. Retail fur trade in this country was decimated largely because of ALF actions. And the government didn't step in to save it. The government hasn't stepped in to save greyhound racing. Greyhound racing's been massively in decline for years. Scotland and Wales banned it. It's been in decline in England for a long time. The government haven't stepped in to rescue that industry. So there's some they'll step in sometimes, not all the times. They'll step in. They'll let the smaller ones go, but the real big ones, real corporate ones that have loads of influence on the government, they won't. They'll steadfastly defend those industries.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought that the animal testing industry, the vivisection, the whole professorship thing, the big pharmaceutical companies, they are massively powerful. And I think there's something, I've never been able to put my finger on it, but there's something simply evil that's working behind the scenes. And I don't think it's not like the meat industry or the dairy industry or the egg industry or the leather industry or, all those other industries. I think there's something special that they are protecting. And I think it's very, very evil and very, very deep. And it's something that we haven't really discovered what it is. But I've always had this theory about that. I don't know. I can't say anymore. It's just I think there's got to be a reason, why, like you say, why they're protecting it.
It sounds like they wanted less to protect the industries. That's why they didn't help them, but more to control of the free thinking of people, the radical thinking of people, the belief that one should act against oppression. Almost that they wanted to teach a lesson to deter others from joining the ranks. And I think that this is true today in so many levels for so many, activism fields. I mean, governments want to deter people from joining.
Yeah, well, we certainly don't seem to be a threat anymore, which is one thing that we're going to talk to our second special guest. But Ronnie, is Louise available?
I can certainly give her a shout. I think she's very close by.
Very good. Well,
yeah, she's
here. Okay, well, while you're getting yourself sorted out, I'm going to show a small video.
Sit down.
But obviously they were in a very distressed condition. They were very shy, terrified. They had none of the normal reactions of a dog. I went into the actual laboratory and removed 2 of the smoking beagles, and I was subsequently apprehended by the police and questioned as to the whereabouts of these dogs. By then, of course, I'd passed them on. They'd gone to safe homes, and the police, they made a great deal of the fact that the dogs were almost certain to die once they'd been released from the laboratory and from the sterile conditions. But we refused to hand the dogs back, and it actually has now transpired that they've spent, some 3 years at least, leading a perfectly happy and normal existence.
That's a nice one to interlink. Welcome, Louise.
Welcome, Louise.
Hello, Louise.
So nice to have you here. How are you?
Yeah, good. I'm all right. Yeah. Was it MBR shite hole yesterday?
The hell, the gates of hell.
Oh, shite hole.
All right, okay. Just to let people know, Wendy's having computer problems.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. It's
Yeah,
really difficult because I can only see a little bit. I can see you on tiny screen now, and I can't see the comments. And yeah, I've got to hold my phone, which is not not the easiest. So, and my computer's had a bit of a meltdown. I think it's the heat; it just overheated.
Yeah.
I think it's 32 degrees in here, so it's not great.
Wow.
Anyway, apologies.
Well, I'll turn your volume up in case you need to interrupt us, Wendy, and then we'll be able to hear you. So I believe Wendy and Nella have got a series of questions for you, Louise.
Oh, okay. Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Don't worry, they're not shite.
At least I hope so. I mean, we were talking earlier about the role of women in ALF, and the fact that very often the criticism is that this was a very male, way of acting. But I said before that I found this to be unfair for ALF and also for women, because there is a long tradition of women in direct action, and I wish you could talk about it as someone who is involved with direct action in the past and now.
Well, I think there was a kind of image years ago that I remember being kind of bandied about, and it was very male orientated, and it was an activist with a mask on, holding a beagle, iconic. And they were men in the pictures. They weren't female. I don't know how you can kind of really tell, but you can. Especially with one particular picture that was always being used. And it was actually my mum who actually kind of insulted the female activist that was sat with us. And she said, well, of course, it's all men, isn't it, that do rescue, ALF rescues. And this person turned around and kind of said, no, it isn't, Celia. They're females as well. They're women. Oh, really? Oh, gosh, I never knew that. And we were kind of going, oh, no, but yes, you did have that kind of image. When you can kind of see in the picture of the Santa Claus, that's definitely a woman.
That other one's a woman.
Is that a woman as well?
I think that's a woman, the beast.
Yeah, it could well be. And of course, you've got the very iconic one of the female holding the collie dog. I'm not too sure where the breeding place is, so it's back in the early 80s, and that's an absolutely classic picture of a really lovely
just in the interest of clarification, the left one with the Santa is a man, and the right one is a woman. Yeah, because I know both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it goes to show you what I know. I'll shut up.
Yeah.
But there is this notion that it's all male, and you'd be kind of forgiven for that, really, because a lot of men were in the, make up a lot of the movement, and also vocally as well. They still do. It's not really women that come out and speak about their activism or other activists. I always try and encourage female activists to talk about their experiences. That's quite important, but they're quite reluctant to do so, which is a real shame because they've got a history, and it encourages other women to come into the movement to do those things. So they're kind of reluctant to actually speak, which is a real shame because the history is mind-blowing with it. It's incredible what they've done. And you kind of think, oh, God, if only you could tell a story, not just to me, but to others, that would be fab. But some of them are very reluctant to do so. I mean, I'm not. I could talk, forever.
No, you couldn't, surely.
If I can just say that when in August '86, it was Viv Smith that actually asked me if I wanted to take on the role as national ALF press officer. You know, she could have asked a woman to do it. You know, you know, but I think just on one, maybe not everyone's going to agree with me on this, but I think men are more likely to shout about themselves more than women. I think they're more egotistical. I think that's true.
Yeah, I think that's true, actually. I do think that's true. And I think, and there's a lot of women as well. And this was something I was going to just mention. There was a lot of women behind the scenes with their male partners that were married that would also help the ALF as well. There was a lot of there was a lot of rich background to this. It wasn't just the activists involved, but the people in the faraway reaches that were doing a lot of work as well. It was a collective of peoples together that were male and female.
They do say that behind every great man is a greater woman.
Yeah, I'd agree. Ronnie's not going to disagree.
I daren't disagree.
But yes, I think it's a shame. Yeah, I do, Nella, to be honest. There should be more women speaking out and speaking up about what involvements they've had in the movement and how they've shaped the movement.
Of course, an important thing is, obviously, you know, where the ALF rescued animals wouldn't have been able to do so without anywhere to take them. And invariably, the rescue centres, the people that took in the rescued animals, they were almost all women. There were some men involved, but those places were run by women.
Yeah, they were
taking the animals, and the raids couldn't have happened without that.
And like even at MBR yesterday, majority of the people sat there were women.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely true.
They've got male partners, but they're nowhere to be seen. You know, they're predominantly female that are up there speaking out. You know, so again, you know, there's a small group of guys, and they're absolutely lovely and they're very vocal, but you know, hello, Wendy.
Oh, finally.
But there's a lot of females, you know, that campaign for so much.
No, we can't hear you, Wendy.
Can't hear you, no.
Oh, we can hear
you.
There seems to be a delay, I think it is.
I think her phone's cooked.
This is a shame.
I mean, wouldn't it be a good idea if the supporters group maybe did a special edition on behalf of all the women activists that have taken place, you know, because otherwise it's going to be lost, isn't it? And you know, when we're all dead and buried, you know, and ALF isn't very much now in the UK.
We're not going to die,
Might all be forgotten about, you know.
I think that's right, but I think we've got a general problem in the movement of where did we come from, where are we going to? And if we don't understand our history, how can we move forward as a movement? That's not even tied in, is it? It's not really tied in.
I think it would be such
whether
a
you're
shame.
male or female or not.
I think it'd be such a shame that, you know, you've got the art in the history of art. The women are generally left out. There were some great women composers. The great women composers are generally left out of the history of art and the history of music. I think it'd be, considering ALF is so unique, and there's no movement more unique than ALF, in my opinion. I think it'd be a terrible shame if that was lost as well, you know, and it was remembered as being a male.
There could be a legal reason, though, in a way, because, like Ronnie was saying earlier, the women tended not to get nicked and jailed. So some of them presumably still won't be able to talk about what they did.
Yeah. I mean, you know, there are some, you know, there are some sadly that passed away. I mean, like there's a woman called Sue Smith, who was actually one of the people who was involved in the foundation of the Band of Mercy when we met, the six of us met to found it, which, you know, obviously later became the ALF. And she was a brilliant activist. She never ever got caught, but she passed away quite some years ago, so that's why I can mention her name. And there's, you know, there have been lots of others, and I think there are quite a few, as I said earlier, that have never been caught, so they wouldn't want to come forward.
No, and there should be some kind of recordings of those women that have played a part, those that, you know, don't want to show their faces, but acknowledge that they've done things and helped, you know, the ALF.
Well,
And
maybe you could organise that, Louise. Go around and say, we want to do some interviews with you, but don't worry, we won't show this until you're dead.
What we're going to do is we're going to put it in a canister and then dig it up around 2050
for future generation. So, Louise, you mentioned all this network of people behind the scenes that they were supporting and they were really important to the cause.
Yes.
Back then, with less technology, probably less dangers, less risks, but still, with the police trying to tail people and catch ALF, what was the atmosphere? What was the feeling for those who supported, for those networks of invisible people?
How I remember it was very kind of raw in its makeup, in that, you know, you would get a phone call or you would talk very carefully about what you were going to say or do or help in any way that you could. So it was very carefully composed. It was very carefully thought out. We knew different things about what was happening and how to try and help. And so, I mean, I have to be careful here as well a little bit. So, it had a way of coming through. The atmosphere isn't like today. The atmosphere was very, very different, and in some ways actually better. Even though the risks were big, you kind of knew what you were doing. We've got more technology than we've ever had and less communication than we've ever had. You know, there was always communication with people, and you would meet those people and you would know those people, and you'd be able to move in a very clear way. You were like a resistance movement. You worked.
The jeopardy would help bring people together, wouldn't it?
Yeah, very much so. So you would learn to shut your mouth, and you that is what you would do. It was so serious for everybody else. If you were that linchpin, you have to be very, very careful. So you learn, and I did at a very early age, to shut my mouth and keep quiet, but move in a way
you should have told
Ronnie.
Right
kind of way.
So what happened?
This is a time for revenge now, isn't it? So we're gonna move on to our final surprise guest, and so I'm going to bring him on. And Mel, welcome to the show. Just to let you know, Wendy is having some problems with her equipment, so I'm not quite sure whether she'll be able to join us, but welcome to the show anyway.
Welcome, Mel.
Thank
you for being with us today.
Yeah, apologies. I'm just returned home from being at LabCorp, where I've left people still outside the gate. So, yeah.
Yeah, I saw you earlier.
Yeah, we had a large video lorry there today with the.
It's brilliant.
It's a pretty angry demo going on there.
Yeah, it was really good. Really good, Mel.
Yeah, I mean, I think what was particularly hard hitting about it was they actually shut the main entrances to LabCorp. And I'm pretty sure that was because, as we were pointing out, there were people coming out those gates who were undoubtedly on that film.
Yeah, right.
And they pretty much shut the front gates down, and they started letting the cars out further up the road.
Yeah.
So but it was good to see some really angry people there today. There was a lot of real anger vented towards the people coming out. So, and the video lorry,
very good.
Yeah, the video lorry was amazing, and thankfully it worked. So yeah. Yeah.
Hey Mel, sorry, I'm having computer issues, so I think I'm back.
Yeah.
I don't know. My computer might.
Yeah, welcome back, Wendy.
Thank you. I've had a disaster of a show, haven't I? Never mind. I'm just really sad because I just wanted to hear everything you were all saying, really rapt, but I couldn't hear very well. But anyway, I'm here now. Mel, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Yeah, so I just returned back from LabCorp with NBR first, and then we got the video lorry outside LabCorp with the animal aid footage on it. It's fair to say it was an angry reaction from all concerned. And they shut the gates of the main gates at LabCorp and stopped letting any of their workers out there and letting them out up the road. Fortunately, we had people up there as well waiting for them. So, I think it made the point that when you're confronted with the reality of what goes on inside LabCorp, suddenly the heat goes up and the anger went up. And even, I found myself really letting rip at them, just watching the images and realizing I was looking at the very people coming out, some of whom who were no doubt in the video. You just boil over with anger, and I suppose that's probably what part of what
very good.
Yeah, ALF.
So 50 years have passed from the creation of ALF. Could you make a comparison of the movement back then and the movement now, since you are coming from an action even today?
Yeah, it's a very, very different movement. And I'll be perfectly honest, I was a lot happier back then than I am now with the way the movement operates. I think the ALF was a vitally important part of the movement. It had a huge influence on me when I first got involved in the very early 1980s. And I think one of the important things about when you talk about the ALF is the obvious thing you say about it is a couple of things really I think are important. One is, and it was said by many people at the time, that the ALF wasn't an organisation, it was a state of mind. In other words, if you were so angered by what you learned about animal exploitation, whether it was in laboratories or factory farms or slaughters or whatever, you could take action, direct action, to save animals or to destroy the property of those who were causing the harm. And that was, I think, very important. I think there's another very equally important thing about the ALF, and that is it represented not only a mindset, but also it was the first time that the ALF actually was probably more responsible for opening up animal abuse to the world than any other section of the animal rights movement, because they were going into these places. In fact, the first film I ever saw inside a battery farm was a very grainy piece of film taken on a handheld camera inside a battery farm. And it did actually get on some news outlet at the time, in the very early 1980s, and I suspect, or late 70s could have been. And I suspect that's probably the first time most people ever saw inside a factory farm. And that was because the ALF had carried in, at that point, a camera to film the liberation of these hens. So when we talk about the ALF, we talk about, the saving of animals and the destruction of the animal exploitation industries. But I think also equally importantly, I think the ALF was of massive importance in opening up a whole debate about animal rights and what we were fighting for. To the extent that, for me personally, I still think that element is just as important now. Sadly, it's not. It doesn't seem it is as important now to large swathes of the movement. And in fact, I detect even an embarrassment from some quarters that such things ever happened. And in fact, to the point that only a couple of weeks ago, when we had the demonstration at NBR, as a kind of remembrance of the 50 years of the ALF, there was a demonstration at NBR. And after that demonstration happened, there was some trouble with the police because people were angry. But some of the comments we were reading the next day from people, supposedly animal rights people, slamming the ALF as thugs, slamming the people there as thuggish because they were angry at what was happening at NBR. It really struck me how far we have come from misunderstanding what the ALF was and what it is and what it means to the movement. And I'm very saddened by the situation these days, that we have a movement that seems so disassociated from that past, and also just from that past, from that state of mind, that direct action way of thinking that was so important then, and I think is still, in fact, probably even as important now, even though it doesn't happen on the same scale. It should always be there. It's a fundamental part of the animal rights movement. And lastly, what I would say is that I absolutely cannot believe that anyone seriously thinks we are going to make a fundamental change to the way animals are perceived, the status of animals, without the cutting edge of the ALF or that direct action ethos. It never was the major part of the movement. It never was, but it was, for what it was vitally important. And I believe absolutely that remains the truth today, regardless of anything else you want to say about it. That's my feeling.
Can I ask a couple of things here, and maybe make a little comment as well? In one thing that keeps coming up is that, and I saw it in the comments earlier on as well. I couldn't say anything because my computer was melting at the time, but people are talking about the ALF and there should be a new ALF, and it's almost like the ALF are, and I know it started this way, but are a group. And like people were talking about, oh, the ALF turned up at MBR and they were thugs. And it's like, I think it doesn't help the fact that we are talking about the ALF as if they're a group, because actually any ALF really now, it's about action, isn't it? It's about the actions that take place within certain conditions, like you said, to liberate fellow animals or to create economic damage, something that is direct action that fits within those parameters of ALF principles. Any one of us, anyone can go ahead and do something like that. You can be an autonomous person and go ahead and do something like that, and it can be and fit with an ALF action. Am I correct? And yet we just talk about the ALF as if they're a group that's gone, they were created, they did all this stuff, and then they've gone. And actually, I think it's more empowering if we think of it as actions rather than a group, or you have to be this image of, like we were talking earlier, of this image of the mask and this, like I was reading, Patrice Jones has written a piece, or she wrote a piece quite a while ago, an eco-feminist piece about the ALF, very supportive of ALF actually, and through a feminist perspective. And it's really enlightening, and actually compares ALF with ecofeminism, how direct action is very important to a movement. And it's the actual using your body in a physical way to create immediate impact for someone who needs liberating, or to cause problems for the people who are oppressing. And I think from a feminist perspective, it really made me see it in a very different light. And I thought, actually, yeah, and actually feminism and the suffragettes and women's history goes way back into direct action. It's a very feminist it's a very feminist principle, and it's not about theory, it's about action. But then also there is indirect action, which is also important, like education, things, getting into legal routes and all of that stuff. But I think the two have to work together. And I don't think we can just create animal liberation with one or the other. I think the direct action and indirect action have to work together and have more collaboration, and not slag each other off, and not be critical and call another part of the movement thugs because they are angry. We're right to be angry. We should all be angry. We're it's the most oppressive, like Robin was saying earlier, the most oppressive, industries and systems that's ever been known, and it's ongoing day after day, and we should be angry. And I agree that direct action is really important, but I think it's more empowering if we think of it as a form of action rather than it's a group and I have to look like this or do this. And I think people need to realize that as well. That's
100% with what you just said, Wendy.
Yeah, ALF was always a form of action. If people took a particular form of action, they could call themselves ALF, and that was what it was. That's why it spread so rapidly everywhere, because it was people didn't have to join up to something, send money, fill in a form or anything like that. Just do a particular form of action, and they'd be ALF. That's why it spread everywhere. The autonomous nature of it as well helped with that, and that's a big lesson. I think the movement as a whole can learn from ALF. It's a huge legacy. This do-it-yourself. It's interesting that ALF arose around about the time of the punk movement, which was do-it-yourself music, wasn't it? There was that do-it-yourself kind of ethos about things back in those days, like the kind of late 70s time. And we've lost that, as a movement, we've very much lost that. People waiting around to be told what to do by sort of global organisations and not using their own initiative. And that's,
do you think also the fact, do you feel like social media, sorry, Ronnie, to interrupt, I was just thinking about the whole people not feeling empowered to take action or take autonomous action, especially because we have this this kind of landscape now where it's social media and it's about an influencer going off and doing all these actions and being the face of that action and that campaign, and then everyone following them and supporting their Patreon and like, oh, you're a hero, you're a savior, you're doing this activism. And actually it's very disempowering for just an ordinary person to feel like I can do something, I can organize something, I can set something up, I can go and do something on my own as well. It doesn't have to be part of a big group. And I wonder if that's created a lot of this disempowerment as well, is social media and individualism and influencing and all of that.
Everything was people. There wasn't people kind of going around, telling other people what to do in the ALF. It did happen a little bit. I used to go around giving talks and like inciting people a bit, stuff like that. But that was kind of only a really small part of it. Most of it was people just seeing what other people did and doing the same. That's why it went worldwide. And that doesn't, you don't get people acting on their own initiative.
But
like
I also feel sometimes that we don't talk enough about the ALF. We don't talk enough about the good, positive side that it gave. I think those people gave a lot to the movement. They gave their liberty, and some even gave their lives. And I don't think sometimes we talk enough about the positive side of that side of things. Like Mel said, it was very much a mindset. And even when we were younger, like I can remember being 16, 17, not brilliant with mobility, but I believed in myself enough to get a group of us together and go and rescue animals that needed rescuing, because those activists that were behind that imagery made me think, well, hey, I can have a slice of this. I can help where I can. If they're saying don't leave a dog on a balcony, go and help that dog, then that mindset is, I will go and do that. I am loyal to you. I am loyal to the ALF. I am in love with the idea of being involved in the ALF. Of course I am. It's about freedom for those animals that are being persecuted. Why would you not? So when I was 16, 17, I was probably even younger than that, 14. And I remember going to a chicken place on my own and taking a can of spray and spraying up the walls. I was 14. It took me ages to get there, and I really didn't think I was going to. But because I believed in the ALF, because I knew those men and women were there with me, although not physically but spiritually, that pushed me on to do that. And that has stayed with me all the way through my life. She has been a constant. The ALF, me, has been a constant in my life. Whatever I try to do or whatever I say, that's my mindset. Even if I don't lift a finger, it's still my mindset. And it always will be until the day I die.
Something I want to, it's always really important to me about this, and particularly because it's non-human, because it's animal rights, it's non-human animals, is, historically we know that even in human rights struggles, from the suffragettes through to, fights for basic union rights or, children's rights, whatever. You look across all these great social movements, almost bar none, all of them had a functional, active, strong direct action part of the movement. And particularly when you look at the suffragettes, it to me, is a massively influential example of why it's so important. Because, you had 50% of the country who were denied the vote, 50%, half the people denied the vote because of their gender. And the idea that they were going to change that through asking Parliament, and they did all that. They went through the political process, and they really did. They wrung the political process dry to try and get predominantly men to change that situation for them. And it wasn't happening because of the history and how to go there. And they realised, even though it was a relatively small part of the women's movement, realised that if they didn't act in a direct way, the likelihood was they were going to wait forever, and nothing would happen. So they took direct action. And to me, when I think about what happens to animals all the time, and again, I was reminded just now after I come back from LabCorp, and I just kept thinking on the way home, we're not going to change this just by being polite. There is no way we're going to change this just by being polite. As much as I want that to be, as much as I want to believe a democracy will do that, I know it won't for animals. I know it won't. It absolutely won't. It won't without always being somewhere in our arsenal the ability at some point to say, right, if you don't listen, we can make you listen. I'm sorry, I want to be really blunt about this. I don't think animal rights is possible at all unless we maintain some level of, direct action, the ALF, whatever you want to call it. And that's not to say that everything else you do isn't important, because, like I said, I don't think the ALF was the biggest part of our movement. It never was. But its influence punched way above its weight in a very important way. And I think that kind of action signals to a government, especially in a democracy like ours, look, this is important to actually probably the majority of people, but you're ignoring it. And because you're ignoring it, then if you do ignore that democratic process, that evidence-based call for animal rights, and it is, we know all the time the evidence is growing about how and why the status of animals must be changed, and yet still we have governments repeatedly pandering to business, whether it's the animal agriculture industry, whether it's the animal research industry, or hunters, whoever, still pandering to this idea that it's not that important. It is that fucking important. It really is.
But I think what's most important, we all agree, I think we all agree here, that ALF was an extremely important part of the movement. What we've got to ask ourselves is why people aren't prepared nowadays to carry out ALF style actions. They're not. Why aren't they? This is the question that we need to find out.
Yeah.
Well,
into this.
Sorry, I was going to say
one of the reasons I hear a lot is there are just too many laws now. There's just too much surveillance. That's common, but also, and I've touched on this talking to the others as well. That we live in an age where people have got more. There are bigger priorities on them. Their jobs, their mortgages, their families, and that's more important now. I personally don't buy that. I really don't. But they are reasons that are given, and probably the laws that now exist and the surveillance state and everything else we live in, I think probably has led to a situation where people believe, we can't get away with it anymore. And they've built their own kind of constraints inside their own heads. I think as a movement, we're a bit like that now.
People didn't worry about that in the past. People in the past, they didn't worry about whether they were going to go to prison. They knew that like Ronnie said earlier, that we thought that we were quite likely to be sent to prison, but that didn't put us off doing what we wanted to do, And people had families then, and people had jobs then, but they didn't stop people from going up. So something has changed. Something dramatically has changed.
It's young people, I think.
When I first was arrested, I had a mortgage, I had a job and everything the first time I got sent down, but it was never a consideration to stop me doing what I did. If I lose it, I lose it, and I did. And I'm glad. I'm absolutely glad. I'll do it all again, in a heartbeat.
Just a question on that. Like, if you've got someone you actually are responsible for, like kids or fellow animals, which a lot of people in the movement do now. Like, there's like most people I know in the movement are caring for individuals that are rescues, which kind of goes with the territory. But then you feel definitely responsible, like for those people as well. Do you know what I mean? And maybe that's a big factor as well for a lot of people, not just like jobs and stuff, but and especially again going back to the sex class thing. Women, I think, often fall as the carers a lot in the movement as well, and maybe that again is like a gendered angle.
I mean, I've had to have this discussion. I've had to have a discussion with Ronnie. I've had to have a discussion with my mum. I've had to have a discussion when I've done those little bits that I've done at LabCorp and in Vigo and Sequani. I had to have that discussion, what would happen if my money was taken off me, or, and that is still a risk. I mean, sad to say, but I think the government would take my money regardless of what I actually fucking did. But I have had to have those discussions, and I think it is a very real fear. I think it's a very real fear for many. What if I do this? What will happen to that? What will happen to that person if I go forward? And I've had to arrange things with Ronnie to say, look, if I get held over, can you make sure that Celia's okay? Can you make sure the cats are all right? And he does, and he's there, and he'll drive back and pick me up and all the things that go with that. So I understand that to some degree, but I can't understand the degree of, there's so much you can do within the confines of breaking the law. You don't actually have to go to prison to push those kind of limits. There is still quite a lot you can actually do within actually breaking the law. There are elements.
Okay, then. So as we move towards the end, then I want to pick up on this interesting question from Emma, but I also want to bring a few strands together, if I may, based on everything that our guest panelists have said. For example, Ronnie, in your book, you talk about how even the Band of Mercy were being criticised by Sidney Hicks from the BUAV at one point, right? And then the BUAV was radicalised, and then they became supportive. And then you got groups like Animal Aid who started to slag ALF off again. Now, Mel, the thing that was unusual is for the slagging off to come from the grassroots, whereas you're saying that's where it's coming from. So there's a problem. Is it that people are just different now? They're not as political, or are they kind of worried about these repressive laws that Emma is talking about, or the increase in surveillance? These are kind of big questions for the future of direct action, if there is any.
Who's going for? From my perspective, we're definitely not as political now. I remember when when I was first getting involved, and I remember very well that a lot of people who were getting involved with the ALF, you would also see. I remember seeing people that support miners' strikes at gigs, and I remember particularly going to a football match up north when animal rights groups organised a football match with the miners and help raise money for striking miners. I remember seeing people who were involved in ALF actions in my hometown on the picket line when the print strikes were going on. So there definitely was more political engagement from people on the grassroots of the movement then, who were also taking that forward into the direct action arena for animal rights. So they were more politically engaged. I think they were more ready to unite and more ready to take action together. And by that I mean direct action to further the cause. And I think that's missing now. And there's a lot of arguments about why. Social media's definitely got quite a lot to do with it. A very individualized, egotistical driven movement online. which I think's really done nothing but harm, personally. And that, I think, to me, is a big part of why we don't have a functioning direct action element to our movement like we once had with the ALF. Lack of political ideal from people, and the understanding about getting together to fight a common cause. As for surveillance and increasing police powers with protests, yes, they are a reality. I've just come from a protest where I've heard security guards quoting the new infrastructure thing, that we're now in breach of national infrastructure. My answer then was F off, and we carried on doing what we were doing. Look, you're always going to be up against something. They'll always move the goalpost for you. My worry is that if we bend too far for that, we are literally taking our own base away from ourselves. You have to stand up to it sometimes and just take the consequences. You know, I think it's not rocket science. They will always do this. The more we bend to it, we won't make it better for ourselves. We'll make it a hell of a lot better for ourselves, and the animals will look further and further away. And that's, you know, I think it's just a reality. The reality of living in the kind of society we live in. You either stand up and challenge this, or you lose it.
But the problem goes, in a sense, beyond the ALF, because if you say look at some of the big protests, and once again, you talk about animal experimentation, World Day, you go back to the 1980s, you know, National World Day for Animals in Laboratories. I think there was one march where 20,000 people on it, and certainly there are others where there were 10,000, perhaps 15,000. Now, maybe lucky to get 500. And that seems to be the case across the board, where there's fewer numbers for all sorts of different actions for animal rights. I think a big part of it is a lack of involvement of young people, because way back at the time, you know, when I first became involved in direct action, we were almost all young people, you know, in our late teens, in our early 20s. That was the demographic. There were some older people, but they were very, very much in the minority. When you look at people on a protest today, or in any kind of, you know, action for our fellow animals, the age of people on average is a lot older than that. You'll get more people that are retired than people that are in their teens and 20s. And so it's a question of why is that the case? And I think this is lack of involvement of young people. It's the reason why this has been decreasing action across the board, including direct action. Why has that happened? Social media, I think, is something to do with that, of course. Well, there are other reasons for it. You know, the culture of our society has changed in relation to younger people, perhaps.
I think what Linda said here as well, the whole being consumers, it literally is like everyone now is just a cell of consumption, and everyone is literally addicted to their screens, their phones, everything, you know, just doom scrolling, and it's just no attention span. And also there was something that Roger shared with us in our group the other day. Roger, do you remember you shared something about there's something special about people? It was basically about people who had childhoods during the 70s, so it's quite specific. But actually some of the points that were made in that video were really true, in that, you know, parents would send kids off and go, find yourself something to do or I will. So you went, right, I'm off. You'd go off with a bag of broken biscuits, a bottle of Cura orange squash, and you wouldn't come back till tea time. And it was saying, like, you know, kids were bored. They would build resilience and creativity, and you get the hard knocks of life and you get through it. Whereas I think now it's like helicopter parents. Everyone's like, you know, so mollycoddle, like cotton wool. Everything's like sanitized and medicalized to like within an inch of its life. And it's a whole different mindset and landscape of culture.
I think we're going to have to be careful not to come over as boring old farts here, but I think there is a generational
speak for yourself
that we're dealing with, I think.
Yeah.
Because there is this generation.
But anyway, it's not young people's fault. It's the world they're born into.
I think we were the
Sorry,
Roger. No, I was going to say.
Go ahead. You're a guest.
Sorry, darling. I just think we were the last generation to be born of the older generation. We were the last of that generation, in a sense, where we had radical parents, or I had radical parents, and we were brought up in a house that was kind of Irish Republican, very much for the miners. We had, the Banner Theatre come in here to the house. They were very radical, anti-police, filming my father, who was a trade unionist. Ken Loach as well came here and took my mum and dad out for a meal and chatted, and they all got on very well. We had a very kind of rich environment. And to me, animal rights, as I got kind of into my teenage years, that was an add-on. It's what Mel was saying. It was an add-on. You added it on to all the things that you were interested in, and you wanted to know. You had Greenham Common on the news, and you wanted to know what was happening, and that was being beamed into your home, and all of those things were radicalizing elements to your young life. And then you would meet other people at college and university, or if you went to university, I didn't, I went to college, but those people would also be an influence to you. So we were the last generation, as far as I'm concerned, that came from those roots.
What you've just said there, Louise, is the fact that that is also what some of the pioneers of the vegan social movement said, that that their parents were, they began the Labour Party and this kind of stuff, right? And they were kind of radical. But in sense of, I wasn't like that. My family was very mainstream Tory. It was when I broke free from the family, and then I adopted another family. I used to regard, John Page as my brother, not my actual brother. And so there was a community kind of feel. Then there's a lot of squatting going on. Ronnie mentions squats in his book and everything. It was a different time, as Mel was suggesting and as Robin is suggesting. It's a different time back then. Is it possible to get it back? Is the question, isn't it?
I've got a feeling that it might not be in the present climate. I think if Nigel Farage and Reform got into power, there might be something, there might be protests in that respect. But I think when we were younger, like in the 80s or whatever, Thatcher was in power. It seemed like the SPG were going around attacking people in the streets in Brixton, and there was the punk movement, and there was the anarchist movement. There was almost, like I said earlier, the perfect storm, which then fed into the whole ALF thing. I think since Blair, kind of politics has really dumbed down, and it's dumbed people down, and it's dumbed people down so much, and especially with social media. I'm not sure if we're going to ever get that back again.
Just one last thing. Just one last thing I'd like to say. Going back to what I was just saying right at the beginning about what just coming from LabCorp, and standing there again with the video van and the footage of those animals, the beagles having the tubes forced down their throat, the monkeys thrashing around to try and escape the toxicity testing, all going inside LabCorp just down the road a few months ago. And I thought 40 odd years ago, I saw the very similar images coming out of what was then HLS at the same site. Exactly the same things happening right now. 2006, exactly the same experiments, exactly the same. Nothing's changed. And I thought, why is it? 40 years ago, there would have been 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people down here. There would have been mayhem. There would have been absolute mayhem. There would have been such anger out of our movement. What happened this time? It was like nothing. There's no anger.
No. Do you know another thing? Actually, I've just thought there, Mel, when you were saying that, is I think now as well, and again going back to social media, is like we're seeing micro footage all the time. Like then it would have been footage is released and you haven't seen that before, or it's quite a new thing, or you haven't seen it for a long time. Now you only have to scroll. You literally have to open one of the platforms and you've got images and footage and clips that you don't even want to see, to be honest, and you're like, oh shit, I didn't. But I think it's almost like desensitized now. It's like
there isn't actually a difference here. this was LabCorp today, there's been nothing like that for decades. Nothing. No one's seen anything like that of a UK laboratory for decades. And there it was again, still no anger. How is that possible? It's not
I
like
think
we're used to seeing slaughterhouse footage from this country, you know, and it's we see it all the time. But there's been nothing like this out of a UK lab for decades.
I think the anger's there. The
anger is there.
Very, very
the anger's there, but the people aren't. It's not that there aren't people who are angry. It's just that there are far fewer people that are angry because there's far fewer people
Where do you see
involved.
the anger, Ronnie? Where do you see the anger?
Well, there's people who go outside labs and places like MBR Acres, and they are very angry. It's just the numbers are far fewer. They're just the numbers of people that go along to these things are far fewer.
Absolutely true.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, darling, go on, Robin.
No, I was just going to say. Also, I think like I inadvertently watch a lot of horrific, mind-blowingly horrific footage on Instagram, for instance, of animals being slaughtered, and a lot of people, they post their comments on the footage they're watching. But before we had social media, the people wouldn't have been able to post those comments. They would have gone down to the lab, they would have gone down to the factory farm, the slaughterhouse, and posted their comments physically. And I think social media's got a hell of a lot to answer for this, really. It kind of makes it easier, you know. It makes it easier not to do the activism. And I think it's a shame.
I think you've really nailed it. You know, Robin, I think you've nailed it. I think social media's got a huge amount to answer for. A huge amount, particularly for the animal rights movement. I think has really suffered as a result of overexposure and over reliance on social media.
I think as well, if you look at us as kind of activists and people who've been around years, even myself, like with imagery, I've had so much imagery that I'm desensitized to it. Even the pictures that were being shown at LabCorp, I was looking, and you can quite hear the distress of the pig, and I'm thinking, like that. I'm just going,
I'm the opposite. I'm saturated that I can't watch. I can't bear to watch it. Like literally, I can't bear it.
But surely, the thing I keep coming back to about that footage is nothing's changed. So, isn't anyone waking up to the fact that exactly the same thing's happening 40 years on? Nothing. You know, we've been told by the government. This is what I don't understand about people, why they're not engaging. So you're being fed this line from the government about roadmaps for end animal experiments. The 3 hours this, which we all know a load of bullshit, but let's just take it at that value. But then you see in reality, you can see the fact they've lied. They've just lied. And still no one's going, what the hell? That's what I can't get my head around, is that no one's angry about the fact that nothing's changed. You know?
Do you think that
I mean, like back in the 80s, we used to know, didn't we, that politicians lied, and they were lying back then as much as they were now. You had the punks telling us that and everything else, and so that's a bit different, I suppose. And so it's interesting to kind of tease out where the differences are and where the similarities are. But I mean, like our movement, we're still wedded to political campaigning, as though politics have got anything to do with what we want. And of course it hasn't. How many resources? I mean, it wasn't that long ago that there was a group trying to give £1 million to Donald Trump, and then Rishi Sunak, of all people, and the Pope, for fuck's sake.
Do you think that the lack of involvement is apathy, or maybe that people do not believe, or the majority of people, that can change the world anymore? That maybe in previous decades there was still this belief or hope that things may change, and now people feel deflated.
I think that, you know, one thing you've got to consider is that, you know, this fight is only going to be won by a relatively tiny number of people. Because if you look back, Second World War, France occupied by the Nazis, only 2% of the adult population of France was in any way involved in the French resistance, right? Only 2%, and that's in any way involved. That isn't just the ones with the guns, that's people that supported in any way. 2%. Most of them got their heads down and did the equivalent of watching Big Brother in those days that people do these days. Most people aren't going to do anything. They just want to get on with live their tiny lives and die their tiny deaths. Sadly, it's always going to be up to a very, very small number of people. And it's just, we need to, it's true, isn't it? It's true. It's bollocks, isn't it? It might as well not be born of fucking what anyone ever fucking achieves, except to do harm to the animals on this planet. That is true. It's down to a small number of us. It's just that number is too small.
Has gone into some others who what's the other one? Afghanic.
It's true though, isn't it? It's true.
It's
anyone
true.
else and then just die. And so what was that all about? It might as well never have been born from what you've actually achieved. Right. So it's true. And we're not like that, thankfully. And I'm ever grateful that I'm not like that, and the people around me aren't like that.
Okay,
but that's true. We have to
be positive, Ronnie.
Yeah, no, but that can be turned to a positive because it allows us to focus on what's necessary. It's only a very small minority of us that's going to drive this change. It's just that minority is too small. And how do we make it bigger? In the past, it was bigger.
Well, yeah, but when we were talking to Mel yesterday, that came up because it's interesting because we thought, I remember talking to you still alive, Ronnie, that surveillance and stuff like that would probably stop direct action nowadays, whereas direct action is actually going on. And so then the question is it to do with the size of it? That the state doesn't seem threatened by the amount of direct action at the moment, and so therefore they're at the moment ignoring it, but they could clamp down any time? Or is it that the surveillance system isn't as big and fancy as we think, and that we can get away with regenerating some of it?
You can get away with, I think, if you did a really big, serious direct action like ones we used to do, they'd have you very, very quickly. They've got cameras on all the roads. They can trace somebody from one end of the country to the other. If they want to, they can get you. It depends on whether they want to put their resources into getting whoever it was, depending on the so-called seriousness of what they've done.
But even if you do small direct actions, even if you do small things, you can't get the activists to come with you. And if you can, you're very lucky. But maybe a handful that might come and join you on a little direct action protest. But people are very, very reluctant to do even that.
I did read recently that there's more surveillance in this country of the population than any other country.
I
personally think the police don't really bother to arrest do raids on people like they used to, because they don't really see us as when I say us, I mean the animal rights movement, the animal liberation movement, as a threat, like they used to, because it was a threat at one time, and now they don't even really bother.
Well, I think people aren't doing the stuff that involves serious criminality, then they're not going to come after you in the same way, are they? This is the thing that when all these special police squads were set up and all that, it was to do, people were doing heavy stuff, stuff that, damaged the value of hundreds of thousands of pounds. And that doesn't happen now. So they haven't got the need to do that. But they're still, if you look at protests, how they clamp down on protests, they still are obviously, very concerned about the effect of that. And that's why over the years, the sort of right to protest has been eroded, and they keep pushing that. And what happens is people get used to the new situation, then they push it a little bit more, and that's what's been happening.
I just think that what does that? Sorry, Han. I was just going to ask what the panel think about open rescue, because obviously that's a reaction to the times and going, we're not going to mask. We're proud of what we're doing. And then we're going to go to court and risk the fact we could go to prison, but actually we're going to rely on the jury to say we haven't stolen these dogs, because actually we've openly rescued them. We're proud of it. We think this is a very moral act, and so far it's been quite a positive result in the UK anyway. But what do you think this is an evolution of ALF action, or do you think it's not ALF if it's not underground? I just wonder what your take is on that.
Personally, I thought ALF was far more sensible in having, wearing masks and balaclavas and getting away with it, as much as possible. And you look at Ridgeland Farm now in, America. Those people are now facing prison sentences for up to 30 years, for rescuing 22 beagles. Okay, that wouldn't happen here. That wouldn't happen here because we don't have that kind of sentencing for that kind of action. But I'm more in favour, personally, of not for people not going out and revealing who they are, because the police are going to build files on those people. Social media makes it so easy. I remember when Debbie Vincent was in Shag, and she was working at an animal rescue place. And I went round, there was a box of evidence that the police had got from Facebook of posts by people, saying, some people saying, oh, I'm going to go and burn down a slaughterhouse. So, it's not a good idea to say things like that on Facebook. But, I don't know. I just think they're just going to get more intelligence on people when they don't put masks on. Personally, that's what I think anyway.
Can I put that question? Thank you, Robin, for that. I really appreciate that answer. Can I put that question to Mel and Ronnie and Louise as well? And obviously, Roger, if you want to.
I don't know how many of you are aware of a recent letter that was sent by a new social media group called Save the Dogs.
Save the Dogs.
Yeah, I don't know if you've been taking any notes on, or if you've read the letter they've recently sent to MBR and what they are offered to do. I assume based on what happened at Ridgeland Farm. So Save the Dogs have offered, and I've read the letter, to not only to buy the dogs from MBR at above market value, so above what the laboratories are paying for them. They've also offered in the deal a generous pay severance package to all the workers at MBR if it closes down. Also, a promise not to interfere in any future ventures they may take in the vivisection industry, so on and so forth. So, in other words, they don't think it's acceptable on behalf of the animal rights movement to make huge financial offers to a company that's selling beagle dogs to laboratories, and they think that's okay now. Now, I know that doesn't answer the question about open rescue, but I think it's just a dangerous road that we're starting to go down, where we think that we can start doing cozy deals with companies that breed and sell animals to die in horrific experiments or farms, and think that's anyway okay. I mean, all right, old school or not, I agree with Robin. Put a mask on, do it properly. And as for these, the thing about surveillance, cameras everywhere, that does exist. But I refuse to accept that stops direct action happening. There are always ways. If people are determined enough to find a way to do something, they will. They will find a way. And anyway, even that being the case, I think it needs to be tested. I think this movement needs to show that it's serious about this. There never was any guarantees that this was not going to end in prison for some people, or there are going to be difficulties. That's what struggle's all about. I think we just have to be very, very careful about building a prison in our own minds that tells us we can no longer even risk these things. I think we always have to be prepared to risk. If we're not prepared to take risks, we won't win. I think it's that simple. Not taken away from everything else that people do. There are lots of valuable ways that people campaign for animal rights, and we've all partaken in all of them. But I firmly believe that direct action still has to happen. Whatever we say about the police state and everything else, it will always exist on some level. It will always decide to act against some people who are posing a threat. Well, those people that are posing a threat, maybe they've got a reason for that, and that has to continue to be tested. So, for my part, all that being said, I very much hope and very much believe there is a future for the ALF. That's really all I've got to say on it. Please remember to write to me when I'm banged up.
Mel, you know, if you put a coat on and a mask, people will go, "Oh, look, it's Mel Broughton."
Yeah, exactly. I'd be happy to take part in an open rescue. I really would. I wouldn't be afraid of that at all. You know, I don't say it has no value. You know, there are ways it proves an intent of a movement, and the fact it believes, you know, it has the support of the wider, you know, the wider public. So I'm not totally against it. I can see some merits there, but I also believe that that, you know, the ethos of what the ALF of, you know, live to fight another day is also extremely valid, and it also guarantees you a longer run at it. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Ronnie,
you were saying earlier, Mel, before you came on, actually, I think before Robin came on as well, that the activists that we know well are the ones who got caught.
The most well-known activists in the movement are all the ones that got caught. Yeah.
We got caught. Yeah.
Getting caught isn't the answer. Yeah.
So it's like, have you got any regrets? Yeah, getting caught.
Wendy, you're going to ask Ronnie.
What was the other thing about the ALF animal liberation front, or avoid leaving fingerprints? I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think the thing is that the ethos very much of ALF, it kind of evolved over time, but it ended up as this idea of economic sabotage, where the aim was to, you know, put these places out of business. And with individual places, it did work. There were quite a few places put out of business simply because of the amount of damage that was caused to them. And certainly, in terms of like the fur trade, that had a huge effect, didn't it? All these department stores got rid of their fur department because they didn't want to suffer the economic loss that would be caused by the damage caused to them if they didn't get rid of their fur departments. And so that was a huge success for that way of thinking. So it was kind of that ended up being the main ethos of it, along with rescuing animals and, you know, for the sake of those individual animals that rescued from places. And then there was a publicity that came from that. Whereas open rescue is not the same as that. Open rescue is about, yes, you're rescuing those individual animals, but it's much more about the publicity and the educational effect of it, isn't it? You see, and I think, you know, big question is to what extent could we now have a direct action movement that was focused on economic sabotage in the same way that ALF was back in the past. You know, that's the thing, because there's loads of difficulties in the way of that now that didn't exist in the past. And so you'd have to have people prepared to, you know, prepared to, in a sense, take those additional risks, the chance of being caught, the chances of receiving a really long prison sentences for like causing big amounts of damage, much greater now than they were before. So you're going to get fewer people.
On that front, if you look at MBR at the moment, one of the most successful parts of the campaign against MBR is the MBR suppliers campaign, and they're doing exactly that. We did one on Friday at Barclays in Northampton. It was absolutely brilliant. We're inside the bank for 40 minutes, you know, they're closing them down, and that is economic. We are,
that's it.
And people are doing it. You know,
that's true. That's economic, but it's not. Yeah. But it doesn't carry anywhere near the same level of like serious criminality that causing loads of damage is concerned. Yeah, I mean, that's another way. Yeah, that is economic sabotage, of course, and it's probably more that road that people are liable to go down, where the consequences of it, if they're prosecuted, are far less than if they did huge amounts of damage.
I think there's for me personally, I just think that there is a roadway into to some of this, and I think you can you can have an impact. You can have an impact, and you can be positive, and you can still do direct action, and trying to encourage people to step over that line to make a kind of easier impact. I was trying to do it in a very small way by trying to show people that you could go to a laboratory front and deface that laboratory front and lock on. I thought I'll try and encourage others to do, especially those with disabilities. And I was helped by Alan. I mean, he's a brilliant activist, and we got together, and that's what we did. And I was trying to say in my small way, hey, look how easy this is. Even me in a wheelchair, I'm going to do this and have help, and try and encourage those that are less able to have a go as well. So if they've got a laboratory near them or a place that does something, there's a really easy way of doing this, and it promotes and it makes people aware of what is actually happening.
And of course, if that was multiplied a few times,
if that was multiplied, absolutely, Mel. If that was multiplied over the UK, but that even
happened, does it?
It hasn't happened.
As kind of you hoped it would.
I hoped it
catch
would.
on because it wasn't a high level of criminality.
Because it wasn't a high level. Yeah.
But it didn't.
It didn't, and I was really gutted. And I mean, that wouldn't put me off. I would still carry on and say, "Fuck it, just go for it." But you know, that was the idea, was to get less able people and older people to come with me and have a bash. Why not? And you're going to get very little for it, and you've created awareness. It was a no-brainer to me, but there you go.
If you look at the contrast, that when I was put in prison the first time, and I came out of jail, and I'd just been in prison for 12 months, and I had loads of people come up to me, young people, mostly involved in hunt sabs, come up to me, Ronnie, how do I do it? How do I do what you've done? How do I get involved? I was gobsmacked. I thought me having been in prison, you know, for 12 months would put people off. Nobody would want to do it, but it was the opposite. They're all coming up to me, loads and loads of people coming up to me, and this is like serious damage that where you could get, you know. I mean, I thought I was fortunate, so I've only been in prison for 12 months. For someone doing the same sort of thing that I'd done then today would be getting 10 years, you know, something like that. You know, you know, the sentences have gone up, but like all these people want to get involved. You contrast that with what Louise did. Much lower level of criminality. Just got like, what did you get? Fine or you get a tag, right, for what you did. Much lower level. No one comes forward, and that shows how things have changed.
Never mind, in 50 years we'll have an AI avatar doing it for us.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that's the as long as the AI is doing the experiments instead of animals, that might be the one advantage of AI in that respect, mightn't it? We don't know, you know, they use that.
I don't know. You know, all you can do is strive for what you're doing and be around like-minded people and be positive as much as you can possibly be. That's all for me that I can do. I can't think too much about you know, different things, because it's very depressing if you really want to go down that road. But you know, just the little things that you can achieve, you can make the biggest difference. And yet,
I think something that's very depressing. I think something that's a bit depressing at the moment, and I think Roger would agree with me, was that these people that charge into like the Marriott hotels and the, you know, to say we want cage-free chickens, and you know, thinking about they're going to be put in sheds where they're going to be packed in like sardines in a can. You know? That seems to be the direct action now. People charging in, and that is animal welfare, because they're not saying they want to charge in and rescue the animals and close the place down like ALF. This is like they want to get the conditions better for the chickens in their mind, at least. But they're not that they're not better, you know. And I think this is a real shame. And there's some people that think that Animal Activist Collective, I think they're called, they actually think they could be a right-wing group who are trying to get a foothold in the movement to take over. And I think it's really scary, actually. Maybe that's just a conspiracy theory, and I'm not into conspiracy theories. But, you know, this is the direct action that's going on at the moment. It's an animal welfare direct action. I think
it's militant but not radical, because those two things
are radical at all, because it's actually not saying it's not abolitionist. This is the point.
Yeah, get to the root. Yeah. No, I was saying that in my speech yesterday about we need to be radical and get to the root of the issue, not just
ALF went into a battery shed to clear out all the chickens and put them in a sanctuary, not to put them in a big shed where they say, okay, we won that campaign, let's go and do another hotel, you know. I think that's a real shame, and I think it's really gone downhill, actually.
I think the message, I agree with you, Robin. I think the messaging and everything is really off in this movement. I really do. There are so many kind of animal rights sort of charities, main charities, and it's just a load of absolute wank. I really can't believe. Sorry, but I can't believe.
You got away with words, Louise, isn't you, darling?
It's to do with money, though, isn't it? Because a welfarist campaign is kind of easier to claim a victory on the basis of, isn't it? If you gain some small concession, you can claim a great victory. We've won this great victory. You know, hens are now crammed in sheds and instead of cages. Or, you know, but we won't say about that. And we've won this great victory. Send us donations. Send us money.
Yeah. Exactly.
And a lot of it is to do with, because it's easier to get these so-called victories on the back of welfarist campaigns than it is on abolitionist campaigns. And these organisations won't survive without donations. That's their jobs. So that's why they go down that road.
Corporatised, isn't it? Corporatised.
Yeah.
And they put their campaigns in hotels.
They shouldn't call themselves vegan animal rights then, should they?
No, but they do to get the support.
They get the money,
donations out of vegan.
That's the whole
and that's the point, isn't it? Back to numbers. Like, if we had enough numbers and people can go and do the welfare stuff over there, and that's fine. Like, don't slag them off if they're going to achieve something good. But we need more numbers actually being radical, rather than the radicals getting sucked into the moderate stuff. And that's the issue, isn't it?
Because people follow the action, and I think you had a similar thing really in a sense a little bit. I think with Animal Rising, because their messaging, so their message is terrible. Really, not radical, and yet what people were attracted to Animal Rising because they offered action, and they offered action that they organised for you to do. So if somebody, was upset about what happened to the animals, they wanted to take action. Oh, I can go along and join in with Animal Rising, right? So they used people's action to put out their own message. They got radical people who wanted to taking action, and then on the basis of that, they put out their own message, which wasn't radical, and they used people in that way because people looked at the action. I wanted to do the action, and they didn't look at what the message was that came out of that. And I mean, you had that experience, didn't you, with Animal Rising?
Experience as well. Yeah. And the language that was being used was not the language that I carried with me. I carried an animal liberationist message, not a welfare message. We're never going to win anything on that message, on welfarism. It's just not going to happen. And it's going to get so watered down that we're going to be just...
Louise, it's our main language. Everybody in the movement talks welfare.
Yeah, they do. They do. Yeah, not animal rights. Not
everybody. Actually, it was really inspiring yesterday at the demo in London that there's a lot more now radical language being spoken, a lot more events that are being set up that are much more in terms of outreach, that is, in terms of like using abolitionist language and not putting the welfare framing out there and being very much, that way inclined language.
That's come out of the challenge that's been made to welfarism.
Well, I hope that's true, but I mean, so far I don't see it. I just see people in gazebos. Veganism is a state of kind. No, it isn't. Veganism is animal liberation. So, like if you're going to have a rights-based movement or an animal liberation movement, talk about rights and animal liberation. Not kindness. That's RSPCA language. But look, there's no point in opening this thing up because
we'll be here another 2 hours.
For that. So we ought to figure out a way of bringing this interesting discussion to the end. You know, any ideas?
I have an ask. I have an ask. I would love to ask all our guests if they want and if they can share a memory involving an animal they've rescued, especially back then. You know, some memory that they hold dear.
But obviously, brief one. Everyone's just trying to wrap it up.
The story I always tell is one about the guinea pigs, the baby guinea pigs. When I was involved, this was in Band of Mercy. It was the only animal rescue that the Band of Mercy actually ever carried out because we had so few people. I mean, when it became the ALF, there was a lot of rescues. A couple of us, we went to a place down near Salisbury that bred guinea pigs to laboratories, and we looked at it in the daytime. And they had a vehicle, a delivery van. We thought, right, that's our target. And very often our targets were the delivery vans. We thought, right, we'll come along early hours in the morning. We'll destroy that van. Got there early hours in the morning, and the van was gone. The driver must have taken it home. So we thought, what are we going to do? And so we tried some doors, got into a shed. There's loads of baby guinea pigs there. So we thought, well, let's rescue what we can of the baby guinea pigs. So we grabbed, I think we managed to grab like half a dozen of them. And it was, although it was June, it was a fairly cold night. And so we thought we need to keep them warm. We put them up with jumpers. And we got in touch with sympathisers that lived fairly nearby. He said, bring them round to me. I'll look after them. So we were in the car, driving, about 10 miles to where this guy lived. We got stopped by the police. Police pulled us up. What are you doing out this time of night? There's been house burglaries in the area. We want to search your car. Anyway, what we were doing, we were camping, and we were camping out near to these places and then going and raiding them. So I had a load of camping equipment in the back of the car. And I said, we're on a camping holiday, but we've been delayed because the car broke down. They looked in the boot of the car, saw all the camping equipment, believed us, and thankfully never searched us because we had guinea pigs up jumpers. And we went to the guy's place. The guy actually, I want to name the guy, John Bryant, who was very involved in the animal protection movement, and died, just in recent years. And he was the guy that looked after these guinea pigs the rest of their lives. So I'd like to kind of give him credit for that. But as a result of that, us taking those 6 guinea pigs, that place closed down. They closed down because we're so frightened. People know where we are now. What's the next thing that's going to happen to us? So we're going to close our business down. And that's what happened. So to me, that the memory of that and these little guinea pigs up our jumpers.
Ronnie, I'm so disappointed. I thought you were going to give us the long version.
Well, there is a longer version. Do you want me to do that?
No.
Do you know what I love? Because we were talking about surveillance earlier and how, like Mel was saying, there's the fear that people build up in their mind that might not actually be real because the surveillance might not be as real as we think it is or as bad as we think it is. It works the same way the other way around, isn't it? It's like the exploitation, oppression industries probably a lot of time behave out of fear because actually they might never have got attacked or nothing might have happened. They probably think blown ALF into this massive, like even bigger than it was, scary terrorist movement. Oh my God, we better stop doing this. So the fear of the ALF actually worked in its favour in a way. The fact that it was built
the media did us a big favour. They did us a big favour by putting terror into the hearts of the animal.
Absolutely, and that's what we need again, isn't it? If like fear of, God, if we keep doing this, this might happen to us. Yeah.
Okay, well, my little story. Oh, sorry.
Do you want to answer it?
I was going to say my little story. It's not going to be as long as Ronnie's story. In 1983, myself and 5 other people charged into a mink storage warehouse in the city of London, Garlick Hill. A window fell out of the door. We didn't do that deliberately. It fell out, smashed on the floor, so we didn't know where we were going to go. We went up and up and up and up the stairs. 5 of us charging up. There was thousands and thousands of mink pelts in this warehouse. It was absolutely abominable. The only place we could go when we got to the top floor was through the window. onto this tiny little roof, and we had to open the window to get out. And what we didn't know, it was a hair-thin burglar alarm on the window.
Oh.
And so when eventually we got onto the ledge of this fur warehouse, and all we could see were police with dogs and that down there. And then they came up, they arrested us all. We ended up in court, the 5 of us, for criminal damage to the tune of a hair-thin wire, which was the burglar alarm wire. It was something like, in those days, that was 83. It was about £7.50. I mean,
£7.50.
That's nice. So
how long were you jailed for that, Robin?
How long did we do? We didn't do long for that. No. It's just like all the money it costs to get to that result. It's
get you to court and prison time and everything. Yeah, ridiculous.
So Mel, have you got a short anecdote?
Yeah, I've just been thinking actually. It goes right back to my sort of early foray into direct action, and involves the police as well. I was in a van one night, 3 o'clock in the morning it was, with another person, and in the back of this van were a lot of hens in Hessian sacks that had just come from a battery farm, and we were driving, I think towards West Country somewhere, and it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and we got to a set of traffic lights, and we were in some small town, and we pulled at the traffic lights, and all of a sudden a police car, I could see it in the rearview mirror, was coming up behind us. And me and the driver sat there, both in blue overalls. There were gloves on the dashboard, a mask still lying on the dashboard, and hens in the back. As we went over the traffic lights, I saw the blue lights come on, and I thought, oh no. And then, sure enough, it pulled up in front of us, flagged us over to the side of the road. I looked at my mate, he looks at me, and we both thought, shit. Anyway, there were 2 police officers in the car. One door opened, and one of the officers got out and started to walk towards the van. I wound down the passenger window trying to think what I'm going to say when we say that. He walked up to the side of the van, looked in, looked at us both, sweating, blue overalls, looked at the dashboard, gloves, mask, looked at us. And as he looked at us, all we could hear was in the back. He looked at me and he went, what's in the back? And I just looked at him and went, chickens. We're taking them to a free-range farm. He went, okay, which way are you headed for? And I kind of came up with the story. And as I said it, I heard the other door open in the police car, and the second officer come out and start to walk towards the van. As he got halfway to us, the officer at the side of me gestured to him and said, get back in the car. So the other officer turned around and went back and got back in the car, and he said, right, go up there, turn left, turn right, and he said, good luck to you, and walked off.
No!
He knew exactly who we were.
What I think that was, Mel? I think that the second officer was allergic to feathers.
Was it? No, that's
a good story. That is.
Never forgot it. He just looked me straight in the face and went, good luck, and walked back to the car.
Oh my God.
That's pretty good, isn't it? That's pretty good.
Roger.
I got a short one. I like to give the Scottish one, but I haven't got time for that. But the short one is I went to a little small holding with the guy actually who was in the Santa costume, who was the activist, and I was the press officer. And we went back to see a piglet who was now grown. And the ALF in their wisdom called the piglet Rasher, right? And so we approached the pen, Rasher's pen, and the activists had never seen Rasher since the liberation. And as he approached, he said, "Well, you're a big bastard now, aren't you?" kind of thing, right? But there was a guy in the next door allotment looking out, thinking the activists were talking to him. Really hilarious. So that's my short one. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, we should have a book of these stories.
I've got just a little very small story. It's just sweet. It was just a beagle from a certain place, and she was only 6 weeks old, and she came here, and she was divine. She was lovely, and I always remember climbing into bed and putting her on the bed, and she curled up with me, her beautiful tattooed ears, you know, a tattoo in her one ear. And I remember kissing her tattoo and telling her everything was going to be okay. And she was only 7 weeks old. And she literally climbed under my top and she fell asleep. And I just remember being 17, 18 and holding her into the crook of my neck and just rocking her very gently asleep. And she went on to a really lovely home. I broke my heart, I have to say. It was very difficult for me to let her go, but it was safe for her to go because they were waiting for her. And she grew up into a beautiful, beautiful dog, and she had a wonderful life with the people that had her. So yes, it was very tough for me, but it was lovely. And that place is still going today, unfortunately. Not a million miles away from Mel. So yes. So, but it was an absolute honour to have her. She was beautiful. But that's a memory I hold here.
You visited for 2 weeks later. She shat on you,
yeah. She was gorgeous. I loved her, and she was, she was a victim of a terrible industry, and she was only a baby.
Can I just ask one final question of everyone here? Just like a really quick answer is: are you hopeful for the future for animal liberation? Are you hopeful?
Yes.
I'm not personally, but I do tend to go towards the pessimism and the optimism. I would say this dream of global veganism is really just cloud cuckoo land. There are 99% of the population of the global population aren't vegan. I would say if we can go out and we can get one person to become a committed, genuine, proper vegan, we have achieved a great deal, and that's what we should focus on. That's my personal opinion.
I think, that's right. I mean, that equates to, in the UK, 100 animals being spared a year, doesn't it? If you're able to do that. In terms of like being hopeful, I kind of don't really think like that. I just think that if we are going to ever achieve animal liberation, what do we need to do? And I'm going to concentrate on doing that. That's kind of how I tend to look at it. And that doesn't really involve hope. It just involves what's necessary to be done. If we're going to
I think that does involve hope. I think hope, because I always remember Patrice Jones saying about hope being a practice, not an emotion. Practicing what you do means that you have hope. Otherwise, you would be defeated, and you wouldn't. So I do. Think
if you felt it was impossible, you wouldn't bother, would you? So you are right in that sense. Yeah.
I mean, for me, I'm hopeful. I know beautiful people in this movement, and it's an honor to know them, and I walk alongside them. So I feel positive for the things that will come and the things that we can change, and move forward together, because that's what we've got, and that's the reality of it. We keep going forward, and we keep giving out our message, and we keep positive as best we possibly can, because the animals have only got us. If we give up hope, that's it. That's the game's over. So there is no option but to keep positive and to keep going, and to support each other with that positivity. And that's it, really. That's how I see it, and I'm very, very pleased I'm in this movement. However hard and difficult it is, I'm very, very pleased that I know the people that I know, and that will never really change for me. It's made me who I am. The people that have come, before me and will come after me will move on, and our positivity has to shine out. It has to do that, and we have to keep on shouting for the animals, because without our voice, it's finished. It's over.
Louise,
Sorry, my darling.
I just said I still
that was
do
your short answer.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just I actually agree. I actually agree
my
with
pessimism
Robin.
earlier, I was saying that I still do a vegan stall, so I must be hopeful.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But
I still do protests, so I'm still hopeful.
You do, yeah.
Yeah.
I actually agree with Robin that about what he said about a vegan world not being possible, because I think in a vegan world be a world where everyone philosophically believed in the principle of veganism. I don't think that's possible. I think what is possible is a situation where we run the show. There's a situation where our culture of animal liberation becomes a dominant culture, and so people that don't believe in that principle, they just have to comply. And we've just got to get enough people on our side to create that situation where we're the ones that call the shots. I think that's possible. And I think that's what we need to aim for. And there's, through various types of action, we need to be aiming for that. That's it.
Just to say for the team here, look at this. Emma's saying, thanks so much for the discussion. I think you need a part 2.
Yeah, we go on forever, can't we? Yeah.
I think Emma's right.
You got two for the price of one, really. We're 2 hours and 30 minutes in, folks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. No, thank you.
Shall we?
Mel, are you hopeful for the future? You didn't answer. You didn't answer more than
Expansively.
Expansively.
Yes, because I'm not prepared to accept the alternative. Is that simple?
Yeah. Okay.
I won't accept the alternative under any
I
circumstances.
agree. I agree.
That's it.
I'm not interested in the rest of it. I just won't accept the alternative, and that's it. And that was rolling on. Sorry, it's not expansive, but it just is that simple. I'm not prepared to accept an alternative.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Well, I think.
Thank you so much, everyone. So good. Such a good chat.
Thank you for being here today with us, for sharing your memories. Thank you for everything you've done, for all the hope and the inspiration you've given to activists all over the world.
Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity to be able to say it. It's fantastic.
And the Animal Rights Show would like to thank our guest panelists in order of appearance, Ronnie and Robin, Louise and Mel. So thanks very much for that. And we'll see our audience soon, I suppose.
And we'll all be back in another 50 years to do another show.
Oh, yeah.
A hologram. AI hologram.
Yeah.
Cheers, everyone.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.